My parents rewrote our toxic past to look like a perfect family. I gathered proof of their lies and planned a revenge so clever they never saw it coming. I still remember the sound of that glass hitting our kitchen's tile floor. Not the crash itself, but the silence right after. That moment when my 10-year-old brain realized I'd just entered the danger zone. Mom's face morphed from her picture-perfect PTA smile into something I couldn't recognize, like flipping a switch. "Are you literally incapable of doing anything right?" she hissed, not bothering to lower her voice even though we had company over. "Look at this mess. Look at it. Just orange juice. That's all it was." But in our house, spilling juice wasn't just an accident. It was a personal attack on her pristine image. Dad watched from behind his San Francisco Chronicle, eyes down, the same way he always did. The newspaper was his shield, his exit strategy from whatever storm was brewing. Our neighbor Mrs. Wilson shifted uncomfortably on her bar stool, suddenly super interested in her coffee mug. That's how it always played out in our Sunset District. Home, Mom the director, Dad the reluctant supporting actor, and me, the perpetual disappointment ruining her perfect scene. I didn't know what narcissism was back then. Didn't understand that normal parents don't make their kids scrub floors for hours as punishment for being embarrassingly clumsy. Didn't realize that most dads don't just watch while their kid gets verbally shredded for honest mistakes. All I knew was that something in our house was seriously off, like we were all reading from different scripts. Looking back now from my apartment, across the bay I can finally see the whole messed up production for what it was. But man, it took nearly 25 years to break free from their toxic grip, and the journey was anything but smooth. Update. Thanks for all the comments and support, y'all. Reading your stories makes me feel less alone. Several people have asked if I ever confronted them directly about the psychological damage they caused. The answer is complicated, and I'm getting to that part. But here's my question. How do you confront someone who's rewritten history so thoroughly they genuinely believe their own lies? Because that's what I was up against. By 13, I'd learned the choreography of our household dance. Keep quiet, stay invisible, anticipate Mom's moods before she even knew she had them. My bedroom became my fortress. Posters of Green Day and Nirvana plastered over the pale blue walls Dad painted when I was 8, back when he still did dad things sometimes. That year, something shifted with Dad. He went from passive observer to active participant in Mom's psychological warfare. Like he finally figured joining her team was easier than standing on the sidelines. I saved up for months working odd neighborhood jobs to buy this second-hand acoustic guitar from Music City, on Irving Street. Nothing fancy, just a basic Yamaha that felt like freedom when I held it. For 3 beautiful weeks, I'd close my door and teach myself chords from YouTube videos, feeling like maybe I'd found something that was just mine, until the night Mom had some colleagues over for dinner. I was upstairs practicing quietly. I swear it was quiet, when Dad burst through my door, face twisted in anger I'd never seen before. "Put that damn thing away. Your mother has important people downstairs, and all they can hear is your awful racket." I froze. "I was being quiet, I promise." "Quiet!" He grabbed the guitar from my hands. "You think this is what quiet sounds like? Your mother is trying to make partner, and you're up here making it impossible for her to have a normal conversation." When he slammed my door on his way out, taking my guitar with him, I heard it crack against the hallway wall. The next morning I found it in the garage, neck snapped clean through. Dad avoided my eyes at breakfast. Mom sipped her coffee, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Like my heart wasn't sitting shattered next to that broken guitar. "Take out the trash before you leave for school," she said without looking up, "and make sure you finish your chores when you get home. The Andersons are coming for dinner." That became our new normal. Dad morphed from the guy who once taught me to ride a bike in Golden Gate Park into Mom's enforcer. My crimes expanded from making messes to existing in ways that inconvenienced her carefully curated life. Got a B+ instead of an A? Grounded for a week for not trying hard enough. Friends wanted me to go to the movies? Sorry, Mom suddenly needed the living room deep cleaned. Every achievement came with a qualifier. Every mistake became evidence of my fundamental flaws. And Dad, who once whispered encouragement when Mom wasn't looking, now echoed her criticisms like they were his own original thoughts. "Why can't you be more like the Chen's daughter?" became his favorite line. "She got into Stanford early decision. What exactly are you doing with your time?" My teenage years blurred into an endless cycle of trying to be invisible, while simultaneously trying to be perfect enough to earn a scrap of approval. Talk about mission impossible, no cap. It wasn't until I was 16 that I stumbled onto the truth that would change everything. Mom had left her iPad on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. It dinged with a notification, and I glanced, over out of habit. The preview showed a message that made my blood run cold. "Miss you already. Last night was worth the risk. Delete these messages when you're done." I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't. But after years of being told I was the problem in our family, something in me snapped. I picked up the iPad and found hundreds of messages between her and someone saved as work conference in her contacts. Mom was having an affair, and not just a one-time thing. This had been going on for over a year according to the message history. I took screenshots and emailed them to myself, then carefully placed the iPad back exactly where she'd left it. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped it. Ironic, considering how many times I'd been punished for being careless with her things. That night, I showed Dad the screenshots. I thought, God, I was so naive. I thought he'd finally see her for what she was, that maybe we could escape together, form some kind of united front. Instead, he slapped me across the face. "How dare you go through your mother's private messages?" he shouted, his face contorted with rage. "You think this gives you the right to invade her privacy? This is exactly the kind of disrespect we've been dealing with for years." I stood there, hand pressed against my stinging cheek, utterly bewildered. "But Dad, she's cheating on you, don't you care?" He lowered his voice to that terrifying quiet tone. "You will delete those screenshots immediately. You will never mention this again. Not to me, not to her, not to anyone. Do you understand?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. But I didn't delete the screenshots. That night I heard them fighting downstairs, the only time I'd ever heard Dad raise his voice to her. I couldn't make out the words, just the anger vibrating through the floorboards. The next morning, Mom left early for work without breakfast. Dad made me pancakes, something he hadn't done since I was little. He didn't apologize for slapping me, but something had changed. He spoke softer, criticized less. Sometimes when Mom launched into one of her tirades about my failures, he'd quietly suggest she was being too harsh. It wasn't freedom, but it was a crack in the foundation of their united front against me. Update. Wow, this blew up overnight. Thanks for the awards. Though seriously, donate to domestic abuse charities, instead if you're feeling generous. Some of you have asked if I ever tried to run away or report them. Truth is, I was too scared of what would happen if I did and ended up back in their house. Plus, emotional abuse doesn't leave the kind of evidence CPS looks for, so I played the long game. But here's what's eating at me now. Was I wrong to stay silent about what I knew? Could I have saved myself years of pain by using her affair as leverage? College became my escape hatch. I applied to schools on the East Coast, as far from San Francisco as I could reasonably get. When the acceptance letter from Boston University arrived, I hid it for 3 days, terrified of my parents' reaction. Mom, predictably, found a way to make it about her. "Boston? That's practically Arctic conditions. Your sinuses have always been terrible in cold weather. Remember that ski trip to Tahoe when you were 11? You were miserable the entire time." The truth was, I'd loved that trip. The only miserable part was her complaining about the subpar accommodations of our 4-star resort. Dad surprised me, though. "It's a good school," he said quietly over dinner. "Engineering program is solid." Mom shot him a look that could have frozen hell itself. "And how exactly are we affording this good school?" I jumped in before he could back down. "I got a partial scholarship, and I've been saving from my barista job, plus loans." "Loans?" she scoffed. "Setting yourself up for a lifetime of debt for what? To get away from us?" I met her eyes. "Yes." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad stared at his plate. Mom's face went through a series of expressions before settling on what I called her martyr mask. "After everything we've done for you," she whispered dramatically, "this is how you repay us." I didn't take the bait, just kept eating my pasta like she hadn't spoken. Dad cleared his throat. "We'll figure out the finances." That night, he slipped an envelope under my door containing $5,000 in cash. No note, no explanation. I never mentioned it, and neither did he. The day I left for Boston was surreal. Mom hugged me at the airport, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face, putting on the performance of devoted mother sending her baby off to college for anyone watching. Dad stood awkwardly to the side, hands shoved in his pockets. "Don't forget where you came from," Mom whispered in my ear, her nails digging into my shoulders. "Family is everything." As the plane took off, I felt the weight lifting, like I'd been swimming underwater for years and finally broke the surface. For the first time, I could breathe. I limited contact to bare minimum, called home once a month, keeping conversations surface level. Spent holidays with new friends, created a life they couldn't touch. For 6 years, I maintained that distance, graduated with my architecture degree, got a job at a small but respected firm in Cambridge, started therapy, learned that what I'd experienced had a name, narcissistic abuse. Then Dad called on my 24th birthday. "Come home for Christmas," he said, his voice different somehow, softer, less certain. "Please." Something in his tone made me agree, though every instinct screamed against it. Walking back into that house felt like stepping into a time warp. Same furniture, same family photos displaying moments of happiness that never actually existed. Same smell of Mom's signature Williams-Sonoma winter forest candles. But Dad was different, grayer, smaller somehow. When he hugged me for what might have been the first time ever, I felt him trembling. "You look good, kid," he said, stepping back to look at me. "Boston agrees with you." Mom emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron I'd never seen before, looking like she was auditioning for a Hallmark movie. "There's my successful architect," she trilled, arms outstretched for a hug I reluctantly accepted. "I always knew you had it in you." Dinner was an exercise in revisionist history. Mom dominated the conversation, rewriting my childhood as some idyllic period where she'd been my biggest champion. Remember when she drove me to all those soccer practices? I played soccer for one season. She complained about the time commitment constantly. Remember how she always helped with my science projects? She once threw away my nearly completed volcano because it was making a mess in the garage. I sat there pushing food around my plate, feeling like I was losing my mind. Was I remembering everything wrong? Had I exaggerated the trauma in my head? Then she said something that snapped me back to reality. You were such a difficult teenager. Lucky you had parents who never gave up on you despite all the trouble you caused. Dad's fork clattered against his plate. That's not how it was. Mom's smile froze. Excuse me? That's not how it was, he repeated, louder this time. You're rewriting history, Caroline. You always do this. I sat perfectly still, afraid to breathe. You were cruel to her, Dad continued, his voice gaining strength. We both were. But you enjoyed it. Mom's face contorted. How dare you? After everything I've done for this family, the sacrifices I've made, the only sacrifice you've ever made was your integrity, Dad shot back. And that went out the window long before your affair. The word hung in the air between us. Affair. The thing we'd never acknowledged. Mom stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. This dinner is over. I will not sit here and be attacked in my own home. Dad remained seated, looking strangely calm. No, Caroline, we're not doing this your way anymore. She stormed out, the front door slamming behind her. The Lexus engine roared to life in the driveway, tires squealing as she pulled away. Dad and I sat in silence for a long moment. I'm sorry, he finally said, eyes fixed on his plate. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I became what she wanted me to be. I didn't know what to say. 24 years of pent-up anger and hurt couldn't be erased with one apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd ever expected to get. Why now? I asked. He sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. Because I'm tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of living her version of reality. He paused. And because I miss my daughter. That Christmas visit changed everything, and nothing. I flew back to Boston with Dad's apology ringing in my ears, but it wasn't enough. Not after everything they'd put me through. The damage they'd done wasn't just going to disappear because Dad finally found his backbone. I decided they both needed to face what they'd done. Really face it, so I got methodical about it. First, I compiled all the evidence I already had. Screenshots of Mom's affair that I'd never deleted, journal entries from my teenage years documenting their emotional abuse, old emails where Mom had threatened to disown me for various perceived infractions. Then I reached out to family members I'd lost touch with, cousins, aunts, uncles, asking innocent questions about family gatherings from my childhood. Remember that Thanksgiving when Mom locked me in my room for spilling cranberry sauce on the tablecloth? What do you remember about that day? Their responses confirmed I wasn't crazy. Others had seen it too, had been uncomfortable, had sometimes tried to intervene only to be shut out by my parents. I created a private TikTok account and started uploading clips, evidence of the gaslighting, the manipulation, the cruelty. Not to share publicly, but to organize everything in one place, to validate my own experiences. I found our old neighbors on Facebook. Mrs. Wilson, who'd been there for the orange juice incident, remembered it vividly. I stopped coming over after that, she wrote. The way your mother spoke to you, I couldn't bear to watch it. Even as I gathered evidence, something strange was happening back in San Francisco. Dad was calling regularly now, actually talking, telling me things about his life, asking about mine. He mentioned he'd started therapy after Mom had an episode at his company Christmas party. She lost it when someone asked about you, he explained. Started screaming about ungrateful children. I had to physically remove her from the building. He paused. That's when I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. Part of me wanted to write off his late-in-life awakening. Where was this insight when I was a defenseless child? But another part recognized something genuine in his efforts. During one call, he said something that broke me open. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I see what happened now. I see what we did to you. And I'm so deeply ashamed. For the first time since I could remember, I heard my father cry. Update. I can't believe how many of you have shared similar stories in the comments. It's both heartbreaking and validating to know I'm not alone. Several people have asked about my revenge plan and whether I went through with it. That's where things get interesting. After months of gathering evidence, I faced a crossroads. Unleash everything and watch their carefully constructed facade crumble, or choose a different path. The hardest question became, would destroying them actually heal me, or just keep me chained to the past in a different way? By spring, I had enough evidence to obliterate my parents' social standing. 63 people in their circle would receive a meticulously documented account of who they really were behind closed doors. The affair, the abuse, the decades of lies. I drafted the email, created the distribution list, attached the evidence. My finger hovered over the send button, and I couldn't do it. Not because I forgave them, not because they didn't deserve it, but because I realized that executing this nuclear option would keep me bound to them in a weird way. I'd still be reacting to them, still making my life decisions based on them, still giving them power over me. What's that saying about resentment? It's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. So I saved the email as a draft, made the TikTok account private, kept the evidence because validation matters, but stopped actively collecting more. Instead, I found a therapist who specialized in narcissistic abuse recovery, started the real work of healing, set boundaries that weren't about punishment, but self-protection. I told Dad about my revenge plan during his visit to Boston that May. We were sitting on a bench along the Charles River, watching rowing teams glide by in the early morning light. I was going to expose both of you, I admitted, had it all ready to go. He nodded slowly. I wouldn't have blamed you. I still might, I warned. If she keeps trying to rewrite history, if you go back to enabling her, I understand. He hesitated. For what it's worth, I've been in therapy for 6 months now, learning about codependency, about how I failed you by trying to keep the peace. He looked out over the water. If you do decide to send that email, would you mention that part? That I'm trying to do better? Something about his request, not asking me to spare him just to acknowledge his efforts to change, felt important. We sat in silence for a while before he spoke again. Your mother isn't well. The therapist thinks narcissistic personality disorder, but she refused to go back after that suggestion. He sighed. Doesn't excuse what she did to you. Nothing does. But I thought you should know. 2 weeks later, Mom called. Actually called, not texted, which was unprecedented. Your father says you have some kind of evidence about our family. Her voice was tight, controlled. He says you've been talking to relatives about me. That's right, I confirmed, refusing to be drawn into defensiveness. A long pause. Then, what do you want? Money? Is that it? The accusation was so perfectly on brand that I almost laughed. I don't want anything from you, Mom. That's the whole point. I don't need anything from you anymore. Then why are you doing this? Trying to destroy our reputation? I'm not doing anything, I said quietly. That's what's freaking you out, isn't it? That I could, but I'm choosing not to. That decision is mine, not yours. She hung up. Classic mom move when a conversation wasn't going her way. Dad called the next day. Mom had checked herself into the hospital after taking too many of her anxiety medications. Not enough to cause serious harm, but enough to trigger a psychiatric evaluation. I felt nothing. No guilt. No responsibility. No obligation to fly home and play the dutiful daughter. I'm sorry she's struggling, I told Dad. But that's not on me to fix. I know, he said. I just thought you should know. 6 months passed. Mom completed an intensive, outpatient program. Started therapy of her own, for anxiety, she claimed, never acknowledging the deeper issues. Dad and I continued our cautious rebuilding, talking weekly. He flew out for my 25th birthday. We went fishing along the Cape, something we'd never done together before. It was awkward and wonderful and healing in ways I couldn't articulate. Wants to see you, he said as we drove back to Boston. For Thanksgiving. I considered it for a long time. I'm not ready for that, he nodded. I'll tell her. But by Christmas, something had shifted in me. My therapist called it detachment with awareness. I still knew who my mother was, still remembered everything that had happened, but the emotional charge was lessening. The power those memories held over me was fading, so I went home for Christmas again. Set clear boundaries in advance. I'd stay at a hotel, not their house, would leave if things got toxic, would not participate in any attempt to glorify or rewrite the past. Mom was different, subdued, still self-centered, still incapable of true empathy, but the overt cruelty seemed to have been replaced by an awkward attempt at civility. Over dinner at Wayfair Tavern, neutral territory, she actually apologized. Not the grand, tearful mea culpa fantasy I'd sometimes imagined, but still. I wasn't always fair to you, she said, studying her wine glass. I expected too much, was too critical. Coming from her, this qualified as a massive admission. No, you weren't fair, I agreed. You were cruel, deliberately cruel. She flinched but didn't argue. Progress, I guess. Dad reached over and squeezed my hand, something the old dad would never have done in front of Mom. We made it through the entire meal without a single blow-up. No one stormed out, no one cried, just 3 damaged people trying, in their imperfect ways, to navigate a new reality. I flew back to Boston the next day. When Dad hugged me goodbye at the airport, he whispered, I'm proud of you. Not because you forgave us, you don't have to, but because you're living, on your own terms now. That's really what breaking free is about, isn't it? Not revenge, not dramatic confrontations, just claiming your life as your own. Mom still slips sometimes, still tries to manipulate, still plays victim. Dad still occasionally enables her, though he's getting better at recognizing it. Old habits die hard for all of us, but I'm no longer that scared kid desperately seeking approval, no longer measuring my worth by their standards, no longer doubting my own reality. The screenshots, journals, recordings, they're still saved on a hard drive in my desk drawer. Insurance, maybe. Or just validation for those moments when the old doubts creep in. The revenge I planned but never executed taught me something important. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't unleash your righteous fury. Sometimes it's just walking away with your truth intact, creating a life so full and authentic that their toxicity can't touch it anymore. That's how I broke free. Not with a bang, but with the quiet certainty that I never needed their version of love in the first place.